Meat has been on the defensive in health conversations for years. Studies linking red meat to cardiovascular disease and premature death have shaped dietary guidelines and pushed millions of people toward plant-based eating. So when a 20-year study came out suggesting that eating meat daily could actually help certain older adults live longer, it stopped researchers in their tracks. Not because it overturns everything we know about meat and health, but because the nuance in the findings reveals something important about nutrition and aging that most people are missing entirely. Let us get into what the study actually found, because the details matter enormously here. Researchers examined whether following a vegetarian diet was associated with living to 100 among 5,203 Chinese adults aged 80 and older. Participants were classified as either vegetarian or omnivore, meaning people who eat both plant and animal foods. Vegetarians were further divided into three subgroups: pesco-vegetarians who eat plant foods plus fish and seafood, ovo-lacto-vegetarians who eat plant foods along with dairy and eggs but no meat or fish, and vegans who eat no animal-derived foods at all. The researchers tracked these participants over roughly 20 years, comparing those who lived to 100 with those who did not, while accounting for lifestyle and health factors including smoking, alcohol use, exercise, body mass index, and chronic disease. The headline finding was this: underweight participants with a BMI below 18.5 who followed a vegetarian diet were significantly less likely to reach 100 than underweight omnivores. Among participants with normal or higher body weight, there were no significant differences between vegetarians and omnivores. But the finding got even more specific when researchers looked at meat consumption directly. Underweight older adults who ate meat every day were 44% more likely to reach 100 compared to underweight vegetarians. When the vegetarian subgroups were examined individually, underweight vegans were significantly less likely to become centenarians than underweight omnivores. The association was not significant for pesco-vegetarians or ovo-lacto-vegetarians, suggesting that the protective effect was most pronounced when all animal protein sources, including meat, were excluded. Now here is where the interpretation requires real care, because the findings are specific in ways that matter a lot. The effect was seen only in underweight older adults. In participants with normal or higher body weight, there was no significant longevity difference between vegetarians and omnivores. This is not a study saying that everyone should eat more meat. It is a study identifying a particular subgroup of very elderly, underweight people for whom meat consumption appears to make a meaningful difference in survival outcomes. Experts also point out that the study used a broad category of meat without distinguishing between red meat, poultry, fish, or processed meat. And critically, the researchers did not measure total protein intake. This makes it difficult to determine whether the longevity benefit was specifically tied to meat consumption or simply to adequate overall protein intake. It is very possible that total protein sufficiency, rather than meat itself, drove the mortality association. The question of whether the same outcome could be achieved through other high-protein foods remains open. So why would meat consumption specifically benefit underweight elderly adults? The answer almost certainly comes down to protein quality and muscle preservation. Meat is a rich source of complete protein, meaning it contains all the essential amino acids the body cannot produce on its own. As people age, maintaining skeletal muscle becomes increasingly critical for physical function, metabolic health, and survival. Research consistently shows that age-related muscle loss, a condition called sarcopenia, accelerates after 70 and is associated with higher all-cause mortality. Preserving muscle through sufficient protein intake, combined with regular movement and strength training, is one of the most important factors in healthy aging. Underweight older adults are at especially high risk for sarcopenia because they are already carrying less muscle mass to begin with. In this population, the difference between adequate and inadequate protein intake is the difference between maintaining functional muscle and losing it at a rate that increases mortality risk. Meat delivers complete protein in a highly bioavailable form that is easy for the body to use, which may explain why daily meat consumption in this specific group showed such a pronounced association with reaching 100. Beyond protein, meat also contains several other compounds that support muscle function and metabolism, including taurine, creatine, carnosine, and anserine. It supplies vitamin B12, iron, zinc, and selenium, which are vital for oxygen transport, immune function, and metabolic processes. Many of these nutrients become harder to obtain in sufficient quantities from plant-only diets, particularly vitamin B12, which is found almost exclusively in animal foods. For an underweight 80-year-old already at nutritional risk, the combined effect of missing both the complete protein and these specific micronutrients may compound the disadvantage in ways that show up in long-term survival data. Now, does this mean the type of meat matters? Yes, significantly. The study grouped all animal proteins together, so it cannot tell us whether red meat, poultry, or fish drove the association. But existing research is fairly clear that lean meats, poultry, and fish are more beneficial for heart health and longevity compared to unprocessed red meat, and especially processed meats like bacon, sausage, and deli meat. From a longevity perspective, minimally processed lean cuts are generally preferable. Grass-fed beef may offer a healthier fat profile than grain-fed beef if budget allows. But the more important distinction is between unprocessed whole cuts and processed products. Processed meats carry elevated risks for cancer and cardiovascular disease that are well established across multiple large studies. How meat is prepared also matters. Cooking at very high temperatures, particularly grilling or charring, produces compounds called heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are potentially carcinogenic. Lower temperature cooking methods using moist heat, such as slow cooking, braising, simmering, poaching, and stewing, preserve nutrients while limiting formation of these harmful compounds. For elderly adults especially, these gentler methods also produce more easily chewed and digested food, which matters when appetite and digestive function are reduced. In practical terms, dietitians recommend aiming for about 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein per meal. That translates to roughly 3 to 4 ounces of lean meat per serving, or an equivalent amount from other protein sources like dairy, eggs, tofu, or legumes. For people at elevated risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, or high cholesterol, limiting unprocessed red meat to no more than 2 to 3 servings per week remains sound advice. Processed meats are best minimized or avoided altogether, regardless of age. The broader takeaway from this research is something that applies beyond the specific question of meat versus no meat. Nutrition recommendations need to be individualized, and what works for one population may not apply to another. The idea that a single dietary framework is optimal for all people at all life stages is increasingly difficult to defend as the research accumulates. For a healthy 40-year-old, reducing meat intake and emphasizing plant-based protein may well be the right direction. For an underweight 85-year-old struggling to maintain muscle mass, the calculus looks very different. What this study adds to the conversation is a reminder that protein adequacy is not a concern only for athletes or bodybuilders. In elderly adults, and particularly in those who are underweight or losing weight, getting enough complete protein is one of the most direct interventions available for reducing mortality risk. Whether that protein comes from meat, fish, eggs, dairy, or a carefully planned combination of plant sources is a question that depends on the individual. But the study suggests that for very elderly underweight adults, the all-or-nothing elimination of animal protein carries risks that deserve serious consideration. New videos every day covering the longevity research that reveals what diet actually does for your health across a lifetime. Subscribe and stay with us.